Greetings, salutations, and I guess season's greetings to everyone out there. It's Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Very, very glad to have you all watching today, and glad to have the gentlemen taking part that are on screen now. We've been talking about this episode for a long time. I swear I didn't plan it this way, but this episode is number 483, and we are talking about 1983. 40 years ago. Will and Jex remember it well, I'm sure. And
Oh, very everything about it.
this year we didn't do a ranking system because that kind of skews the data, I think, in a way, because what you end up with at the top are just albums all of us happen to own. So what we're going to do, because there are so many albums, I said let's do a top 10 and let's do real quick up to 5 honorable mentions. So that's what we're going to do. I'm really excited to see what people are going to come up with. And we're going to do this in the order that the recording order. I don't know how it's going to come out in the finished product, but we're going to start with Bug, and he's going to start with his honorable mentions.
All right. Well, 1983 was a big year in music, I guess, for me. I was 9 years old, turning 10, and really into music and really get into hard rock music in 1983 into 1984. So I'll start with my 5 honorable mentions. I had a really hard time narrowing it down to my number 10 and my number 9 album. And the way that I decided it was I didn't figure the two albums that made it into 10 and 9 would be ones that might get talked about. So those were the ones that I ended up putting at 9 and 10. But here are my honorable mentions. I figured these will be talked about. This is the first Dokken album, Breaking the Chains.
Nice.
It's on the black and red Elektra. The major label debut by Helix, their third album. This is a Canadian press on the Rainbow Capital. Next, the first metal album to go to number 1 on the Billboard charts. Quiet Riot, Metal Health. Again, a Canadian press that's on Pasha. And Twisted Sister. Another Canadian press. Great album. Love the inner sleeve on this one. Band photos and credits. Lyrics. And the fifth one, Y&T, Mean Streak. This is a
Cool
US.
cover. Never seen that before.
Who's that?
Yeah.
So that's on the A&M. That's a US A&M pressing. So those are my 5 honorable mentions from 83.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I have a feeling we'll be seeing most, if not all of those again.
None of them again. That's it.
None of them again. Yeah. Will, what are your top 5 or your 5 runners up? I'm not going to ask you your memories of 1983 because you were minus 17. So.
Yeah. I don't know how you guys rank these, but when I prepare for these, I listen to every album that I think could possibly make the top like 20 and just rank them as I go. So mine are in order that eventually maybe would have been number 5 and just got pushed down. So my number 15, actually, if you guys have the physical, I'm not prepared, so I have nothing. My number 15 is Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind. Some heavy hitters here in the honorable mentions. Number 14 is ZZ Top, Eliminator. 13, I have Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. 12, I have Coney Hatch, Out of Hand. And 11, I have Metallica, Kill 'Em All. So that is my honorable mentions.
There you go.
I'm assuming we'll hear about some of those later.
Nobody else pitched in, so I thought I would try.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Nobody helps.
Nobody ever helps.
All right, Jex, your 5 runners up. I'm determined to say top 5 runners up, but your runners up.
All right. Honorable mentions. How about that? Let me just begin by saying this was hard, man. 1983, so many heavy hitters this year, hard rock and metal. it was a great year. So the process of elimination was real this time around, and these are just albums kept going in and out, and these are the ones that didn't quite make the cut, but still deserve mentioning. First one I picked, I think Bug's gonna be with me on this one. I believe he's a fan. The Slayer, Show No Mercy. You know, I'm not huge on Slayer. I have the first three albums, and then they kind of lose me after that. But I love this debut. This is my favorite album of theirs, so I had to make the cut somehow. Next one up from the UK is Raven. All for One. My Canadian pressing on Bonsai. One of my prized possessions. Next we have from Canada, Anvil, Fortune, Fire. And then an album I like very, very much. It's either you love it or you hate it. Black Sabbath. Born Again. Only album to have Ian Gillan on vocals. And then I thought I'd switch it up for my fifth honorable mention. You know, I've talked about metal and hard rock. Thought I'd switch it up a little bit and talk about Talking Heads. A very, very, very good album. So there you go. Honorable mentions.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So my honorable mentions. One of these has been mentioned already, but I'm going to start off with Vandenberg, Heading for a Storm, the second Vandenberg album on Atco. It didn't come out in North America until 1989, but it's from 1983, the debut album from Europe. Really like this album. This is really heavy. This is more Iron Maiden than Final Countdown. If anybody's curious what the early Europe sounds like on the Epic label. Kansas Drastic Measures. I almost said Drastic Confessions. I was mixing up two albums there. This is an old Canadian cassette on CBS Associated Records. Love this album so much. Second solo album from Robert Plant, The Principle of Moments. We talked about this on our Super Cassette episode that we did with Chris Preston. And here's the one that's been mentioned already. I bought this album in 1987, and at the time, it was the heaviest album I owned. Helix, No Rest for the Wicked. I love this album, love this band. This is an old Canadian Capitol version. So those are the honorable mentions for 1983. We're off to a good start. So let's get started with our number 10. So, Bug, your number 10 for 1983.
All right, number 10 for me, this is Motorhead, Another Perfect Day. This is a Canadian press on Mercury. So this album is the only album to feature Brian Robertson, formerly of Thin Lizzy. Fast Eddie Clark left the band in 1982, and they brought in Brian Robertson, who never really meshed with Lemmy. The drummer, Phil Taylor, was a big Thin Lizzy fan. He convinced Lemmy to bring in Robo, and Robo would go out in satin shorts and slip-on shoes, which didn't really mesh with the leather of Motorhead. The singles on this were I Got Mine and Shine. It kicks off with a song called Back at the Funny Farm, and the bass line on that is very reminiscent of Ace of Spades. This album really didn't click with fans at the beginning, but from what I've read online, a lot of hardcore Motorhead fans have really come around on it since its release back in 1983. But that's my number 10 album, Motorhead, Another Perfect Day.
Will.
So it's me. So my number 10, this was really tough to pick it as a number 10. It came down between this and Kill 'Em All. I have AC/DC, Flick of the Switch, which is the ninth AC/DC album. I mean, it's AC/DC. It's pretty consistent with the AC/DC sound. You're not going to hear it and wonder who it is. Guns for Hire, very underrated AC/DC song. You never really hear about it. That's probably my favorite on the album. Nervous Shakedown, Deep in the Hole. Opens up with Rising Power, which is an excellent album opener. It didn't do as well as Back in Black, which came out two albums earlier, or For Those About to Rock, but I think it's a very solid AC/DC album. Tim actually kind of got me on it to check it out, re-listen to it, so that is my number 10.
Yeah, it's a good album. Really good album. It didn't have any big songs off of it, and it came off of, three big albums in a row. But yeah, it's good. Didn't make my list, but it's good. All right, Jex, new metal
Right.
D's.
Numéro 10. And I swear, I'm not kissing butt here. Just happens to be the first album I'm showing. It's my number 10. It's just how it worked out. It's Y&T, Mean Streak.
Hmm.
This was pretty much my introduction to the band.
Got to be something to it. The two
And I
people
was
have
blown
held it
away.
up. Do you suppose it's any good?
You should check it out. You should check it
I
out.
suppose I probably
Uh,
should. Yeah.
so yeah, so it was my introduction to the band, and I was just like, "Hey, who are these guys?" Um, it's a mixture. It's just the right mix of heavy and melodic. I was sold. I was sold right out of the gate. This is probably the YT album that I'd show someone who's looking to get into the band. I feel like this is a great gateway. That's just my opinion. But yeah, what else can I say? The title track just opens up full force. It kind of lets you know exactly what you're in for. And there's so many good tracks on here. I can't think of one that I don't like. I don't think there's a bad song on here. For me, the highlights are Mean Streak, Straight Through the Heart, and Hang 'em High, just to name a few. So my number 10, YNT, Mean Streak.
All right, my number 10. This has been mentioned already. It'll probably chart higher for some of you, but it made my number 10. The debut from Metallica, Kill 'Em All. Probably the thrashiest album I own because I'm not one for the heavy stuff. This is a prized possession of mine. It's actually a Canadian cassette on Bonsai. I have to credit Greg at High Tides in St. Stephen. He had this. And like a lot of I think the Bonsai releases, it doesn't say side one and side two. It says this side and that side. And this is what the cassette looks like. Yeah, you could find this one and Ride the Lightning on Bonsai, just as you could on Megaforce in the U.S. Bonsai was actually distributed by Polygram in Canada, which meant that Metallica, I think, had major label distribution in Canada before they did in the U.S. I think so. Just a little something to brag about. That's my number 10. So, Bug, you're number 9.
All right, number 9 for me, this is Fastway.
Now, speaking of Fast Eddie.
Exactly. Kind of leads in from my number 10. This is their debut album. And this is Canadian press on Columbia. It's got the red and yellow Columbia with a customized logo on there for Fastway. So, as you mentioned, Fast Eddie Clark. That's the fast of Fastway. Pete Way, the bass player from UFO, was the way part, Fastway. Although Pete Way left the band before they even recorded anything. He left, I believe he went and toured with Ozzy, and then he formed a band called Wasted. But it was kind of a super group when they formed. Jerry Shirley was the drummer from Humble Pie, and then they brought in a kind of an unknown Irish singer named Dave King, who went on to sing in Kathmandu. They had, I think, one album in 1991, which was pretty good. I remember that album. And then he went on to form the band Flogging Molly, which is kind of a Celtic punk band. They've been around since the mid 90s, had some minor kind of alt rock radio stuff, but this is a bit of a departure for Fast Eddie Clark. It's more of a blues rock, a hard blues rock sound more than a heavy metal sound. Easy Livin', Say What You Will would be my favorite tracks off of this. And yeah, that's my number 9 album, Fastway, the debut album.
Yeah, that's a good album. It's more of a, if there's such a thing, it's more American sounding.
Right.
Even though there is a little bit of a Zeppelin, like Dave King had a little bit of a Robert Plant
100%.
sound. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, Say What You Will. That was the song I heard. It was on a compilation called Metal Giants that came out in the late 80s on CBS. And I was like, hey, this is pretty good.
So I found this actually at Digital World in Fredericton. And I went in there a few times when they had a lot of records, but I found they were really overpriced. But I found that for $10. So I was happy with that find.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, you're number 9.
Wow.
My number 9. I feel so awkward having nothing to hold up. Maybe next time I'll be prepared. My number 9 is Ozzy Osbourne with Bark at the Moon, which Randy Rhoads is out. Jake Ely is in. Obviously, that wasn't by anybody's choice, but it's Jake Ely's first collaboration with Ozzy. It's not one of my favorite Ozzy albums. It's definitely not in my top five Ozzy albums, but it's still a good solid album. Bark at the Moon, another great album opener. I kind of like the slowed down Ozzy songs and how he sings them. So You're No Different. I love that song. Rock and Roll Rebel's a great song, but that is my number nine, Bark at the Moon.
Nice. Okay.
All right.
So
Jex.
my number nine. All right. I'm noticing a little theme here. I see that Bug and I we're gonna have a lot of common ground. I can tell already. He showed this one not as part of his list, but this was a runner up, an honorable mention. My number nine is Twisted Sister. You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, which I also have a Canadian pressing, just like he does. Second album for the mighty Twisted Sister, and right from the opening track, the kids are back. You know they mean business. Like it opens up the album so beautifully. Um, you know, it's letting the audience know like you haven't heard The Last of Us yet. You know, we're back. You know, what I love the most about Twisted Sister's first two albums is that they have a raw feel to them. I feel like once Stay Hungry came out, a little more you know, over not overproduced, but it was more produced. Then these are they're a little more raw, and I like that. I think that's the charm of these two first albums. And yeah, I mean, of all the kick-ass tracks on here, one that I absolutely love is "The Power and the Glory." Great song. It has such a catchy bass line, courtesy of Mark the Animal Mendoza. Favorite tracks are "The Kids Are Back," "Ride to Live," "Live to Ride," "The Power and the Glory," and "We're Gonna Make It." So my number nine.
And that album actually, because it's a name that sticks out because he's not on. I don't see him on a lot of albums. That album was produced by a guy named Stuart Epps, who also produced the first two Vandenberg albums. So it's got that kind of. It's got a very dry sound, but I like the sound. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Now that you say that.
yeah.
Hmm.
All right, my number eight. No,
Nine. Nine.
nine. Wow, already a top 10, and I get mixed up. Okay, uh, somebody mentioned this. Will mentioned this. So I'm gonna mention it again. Um, Great Canadian band, Coney Hatch, and Out of Hand, second album. Always like to give these guys some mentions because they're so good. Their new album, Postcard from Germany, get it. And this is actually a U.S. copy on Mercury. You don't see too many U.S. copies. The Canadian copies are on Anthem Records, and but this one's got "Don't Say Make Me," great opener. The song "First Time for Everything" was a minor mainstream rock hit. The song "Shake It" is kind of fun. It's an Andy Curran song. It's about video games, maybe. Uh, Too Far Gone's another one that I like. Actually, the funny thing about this album is that this was the last one that I had to find. I had a hard time finding this, and it didn't come out on CD for many years, but I found the cassette and the record. Side one of this album, all five songs appear on their best of three compilation. So it was the four songs on side two that I'd heard for the first time. So yeah, they didn't do a bad game or a bad game. Maybe they didn't. They didn't do a bad album. So Coney Hatch, Out of Hand, I'll Stop Talking. Bugs number eight.
Number eight
Oh,
for me. Number eight for me was Will's number nine. This is Ozzy Bark at the Moon, mixed by a guy named Tony Bongiovi.
yeah.
All
When you
right.
see Tony Bon Jovi, that means it was recorded at the Power Station in New York.
Power Station, that's
Yeah.
right. Original inner with the lyrics, Ozzy with the short hair. So as Will already mentioned, this is the first with Jakey Lee after Randy Rhoads' death. I didn't get into Ozzy until the Randy Rhoads tribute album came out in '87. That was my first foray into Ozzy. And I actually got the cassette for Bark at the Moon when I was digging through the discount bin at the old Zellers at the Brookside Mall. And I was actually there to get a Kiss cassette because I remember the week before I had been there to get Destroyer. I picked up Destroyer and I only had enough money for one. And I noticed they also had Dynasty in the bin. So I went back the next week to get Dynasty. And while I was digging, I found Bark at the Moon in there and I had enough to get both of them. So that's how I got the cassette originally. Obviously, a bit of a sonic change in direction with Jakey Lee on guitar, but yeah, not a bad Ozzy album. Like Will said, not my favorite, but still a good Aussie album, and that's my number 8 album for 1983.
Cool. Number 8 for Will.
Number 8 for me is a band I'm not really into outside of this album for the most part, and it is Crocus with Headhunter, which is a very good album. Outside of this album, I don't know. But this is my number 8. This went gold in the US and Canada. I believe Screaming in the Night has been, or was and has been their biggest hit they've done. But this album just has everything. It has great artwork, as you can see. Thanks to Bug for helping me out. But like it has fast, it has heavy, it has catchy guitar riffs, it has good vocals. There's some screaming vocals. It's just a really solid album the whole way through. Some of my favorites, Headhunter, the title track, and Nightwolf, my favorite songs on this. So that is my number 8 for 1983.
You know,
That's a great one.
It's just a great. I mean, an album like that goes gold. It was a great time. It's a great time for this
Yeah.
guy. All right, Jex, numero 8.
All right. So my number 8. Once again, thanks to Bug, he's doing all the heavy lifting so far because he's talking about the albums first. So I don't have much left to say. You said everything that was in my notes, but it is Motorhead, Another Perfect Day. This is my number 8. This is actually pretty much my introduction. Well, I had heard the big ones. I had heard Ace of Spades, a handful of other songs, but this was the first album I bought, and it's still my only vinyl, my only Motorhead vinyl. And I love it. I think because it was like my first full album of theirs, it has that special place in my heart. I think it's great, even though it is different. As Bug said, you no longer have Fast Eddie Clark. You said the guy's name, the guy from Thin Lizzy, whose name Robo. It's a weird mix. It's not the same, but I think that's why I like it. It's a change. It's not what you'd expect. It's not repetitive from, you're not listening to Ace of Spades 2, where it's just so different, and that's why I like it as much. And you said your copy is Canadian, so that got my curiosity going because so is mine. But the track listing is way off. Like my copy starts with "I Got Mine" rather than "Back at the Funny Farm," which I thought that was weird because I've always known this track order. So when you listen to it on streaming or something, it starts with "Back at the Funny Farm." I'm like, what the heck? This is supposed to start with "I Got Mine." So
Yeah.
it's strange to me listening to it, right?
Yeah.
So what,
It's hard to listen to any
label is
version.
yours on, Jex? What
It's
label
Mercury.
is yours?
It's
Okay. Huh.
Mercury. Yeah.
And they're both Canadian.
Yeah. So it's
Yep.
yeah.
I can't
So
help
it's
with that. Maybe someone out there can
and
explain. Was it reissued with a changed song order? What's the deal? Because I mean, they weren't on Mercury after that album.
No.
No.
So I'm mistaken. Back at the Funny Farm kicks off side 2. On the back of the album, it's the top. It's listed as the top song as they list the song.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the track listing is from the original version, but it's not true to what's on the album. But anyway, all that regardless.
I did read online the UK pressing on Bronze has a completely different order of songs than what was released in North America. Maybe that's where it comes from.
Right. Yeah. That's probably what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, no matter what, the tracks are all good, no matter what order they come in. So I love it, and that's my number 8.
Okay, so my number 8 is completely off the wall here for everybody else, but I've talked about this album before. I like talking about it. 38 Special, Tour de Force, 1983, obviously, duh. This was the band, I think, I can't count, 6 album, I think. 6 album. Yeah, on A&M Records, A&M cassettes in Canada had a really distinct look to them. I like that artwork quite a bit. By this time, there wasn't much. There was a little bit of the Southern rock, but it was mostly just commercial, radio-friendly rock. I think this band did it very, very well, and I think they had a bigger influence on bands like Bon Jovi than they ever get credit for because they you could have slightly more guitar-oriented music get onto top 40 airwaves. This had 2 top 40 singles, the first 2 songs, If I'd Been the One and Back Where You Belong. But the whole album is really, really good. It's kind of mellow in places, but if you're in that mood, listening to that commercial rock from the 80s, you can easily slide this album alongside and it wouldn't stand out. So that's my number 8.
So we're talking heavy hitters here. Number 7 for me is Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind. This is a U.S. Capitol pressing with the custom logo, custom label on the vinyl. So I'm not a massive Iron Maiden fan. I do have all their albums from the 80s. I got into them in middle school. A friend of mine had given me Live After Death, the VHS tape. That was my introduction to Iron Maiden. This is the first one with Nico McBrain on drums. He does a phenomenal job on this album. The Trooper and Flight of Icarus were the 2 singles, but there's some good tracks. Die With Your Boots On. And on the 95 reissue of the CD, they do Montrose's I've Got the Fire, which is a really good cover. And I didn't see that one coming, Iron Maiden covering Montrose, but they do a really good job on that track. So that's my number 7 album, Iron Maiden.
So my number 7, another album from a person or group that I didn't really venture too much further past the debut. I have Dio with Holy Diver, number 7. Um, this was probably my introduction to Dio outside of Tenacious D. But this would have been before I heard him on the Sabbath albums and before I heard much else. I knew Holy Diver. I don't know if it was from Guitar Hero 2 or Guitar Hero 3. It was on one of the games, so I knew that, and that's kind of where I referenced when I was getting into music, like what songs do I like that I know, and how do I find the CD. It went gold in the US in 84. It went platinum in 89. You had Vivian Campbell on guitar, Jimmy Bain on bass, and Vinny Appice on drums. Very solid album. I know when I was trying to talk to other people about this at the time, because I would have bought this in high school, not in 80s, but in the 2000s. And I thought everyone knew Holy Diver. I just thought it was one of those songs that was popular enough, but everybody knew Rainbow in the Dark, not Holy Diver, which is another excellent song. And I've always been a big fan of Gypsy, but the album from start to finish is excellent. So that is my number 7.
All right, Jackson's number 7.
All right, my number 7. At one point, I might bring up an album that no one's talking about, but let's just keep going. Released. Oh, I've been forgetting the dates. April 1st, 1983. Fast way. Again, Bug beat me to it once again. I'm like one step behind. See, but what's cool? This is mine's a U.S. I know yours was Canadian, and it's got. I don't know if you can see that. Hold on. So it's got the gold,
It's got a
the gold
promo
stamp
stamp
there. Yeah, this was sent to me from my buddy Jim. Shout out to Jim Willis from California. Sent me this many years back. And again, I don't really have much to add. Bug did all the heavy lifting. It's a great album. Oh, you too. What?
Promo as well.
There you go.
I've noticed there are some albums that you seem to see more promo copies of than any, which is weird.
Yeah, it is weird. But yeah, again, not a bad track on here. I was listening to it again. It had been a while, and I was just like, oh man, this song is great. Then the next song come on, like, oh, this is so good. Like, it's consistent, and there's no like, sometimes there's songs like this is good, but But this is just like all the way through. It's so enjoyable, and yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know much else from their discography other than this and the Trick or Treat soundtrack. That's pretty much my beginning and end of my Fastway knowledge. But what I have heard, I love. It's I think they're a great band, and it's too bad they didn't go on for longer. But hey, they squeezed out some great albums, so can't complain. That is my number 7.
I think if you ask most people, Jex, they started to go down immediately after that first album. They never did another album that was that good all the way through. Even the Trick or Treat soundtrack has a couple of older songs, including from the first album, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, my number 7. This is probably the band that I've been into for the least amount of time. Been into them for about 5-6 years now. This was a big album from the 80s. It is Yes 90125. Why that number? It was the catalog number.
Oh.
It just so happened. Now, it changed a couple of times because they were picking numbers that they couldn't get worldwide use for. But I can't tell you how many times as a DJ I've almost said from the album 90210, but yeah, it's 90125. Of course, the big hit single off of this, it was a big comeback album for them. This was the first time I'd heard of this band with Owner of a Lonely Heart. Now, if you're sick of that song, I kind of get it. I think it's a cool song, but it doesn't really sound like the rest of this album. There are songs on here like Hold On and Changes and City of Love, which are just good 80s rock. Like not hard rock. Some of it leans towards hard rock, not really prog. They weren't really prog at this point, although there are some tricky parts to some of the songs. But if you like just 80s rock, I don't know how else to make it more generic. I think you'll find something to like on this album. But yeah, this was the first one that guitarist Trevor Rabin was on. So he wrote a lot of the songs. He sang some of the songs, and he actually went into quite a successful career doing music for movies. You may have seen his name on a lot of movies. So yeah, so while Steve Howe, the original, well, not the original, but the best known Yes guitarist, was off doing Asia, Yes came back and kind of, not a dissimilar thing. So yeah, this was like 4 times platinum album, and it's one of the more common ones that you'll see out there. So yeah, that's my number 7 is Yes with 90125.
So my number 6 is Kiss, Lick It Up. This is a Canadian pressing. Got the white Kiss label. It's on Mercury. So I got into Kiss in 1984 with the Animalize album. Heaven's on Fire, that video was playing all the time. That was my first introduction to Kiss. I didn't even know about the makeup, anything when I first got into Kiss. That didn't come for a couple of years when a buddy of mine had a Kiss magazine. And I was like, I had no idea. The hottest band in the world, Kiss Alive, I knew nothing about that. So after I got into Animalize, my first order for Columbia House was with my brother. We each got to pick 6 cassettes. And there's the cassette. I took some liberties on it when I was a kid.
I was going to say, I've never seen a colored one like that, but okay. It actually doesn't look bad. It doesn't look bad.
Yeah.
I kind of like it.
Yeah. So
that's how rarities are born, people.
That was the cassette I got from Columbia House, 1984. So I really like this album. It continues kind of the harder edge that Creatures of the Night started after their kind of period of experimentation with, The Elder and Unmasked and Dynasty. It kind of gets back to the hard rock streak that they had going with Creatures. And yeah, I really like that album. My number 6 album of 1983.
And here I thought that the Japanese, makeup picture full page Obi strip was the rarest cover, but I guess not. It's the rare colored cassette. Only one note.
One of a kind.
All right, Will, number 6.
My number 6. This list is so hard to make. I think any of these could swap around at any given time, but my number 6, a band that we had to travel forever to see, Night Ranger with Midnight Madness. Their second album. I also have dates, Jex. This came in October 26th. Allegedly.
Nice. I have artwork for you.
Oh, excellent. But yeah, this is a very good album. Not my favorite Night Ranger album, but it's very good. When You Close Your Eyes is the earliest Night Ranger song I remember hearing, like when I was maybe like 7 or 6. It was just on a CD my dad had, like some early Night Ranger stuff I remember. And ever since then, that's been my favorite Night Ranger song. I still love it. Rumors in the Air is another excellent song. Sister Christian was on this album, which was probably their biggest hit, easily their biggest hit. But that is my number 6. Very, very good Night Ranger album.
All right. Jex, número 6.
Yes. Okay. Number 6. Hey, This is a first on this episode. Has not been shown from Germany. You give it up for Accept. Balls to the wall, man. This is man. How can you not like this album?
Oh,
When it
sorry,
starts,
sorry,
those
sorry.
notes, you drop the needle.
Da, 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 da,
You know, just,
da, da.
oh, exactly. And I was trying to think, what was my first, like, when did I first discover this? For the life of me, I couldn't remember. And I think, much to, similar to what Will said about Holy Diver, I think it was one of those early Guitar Hero games, like maybe the very first one. I think
It
that's where I
was
heard
on
it.
one of
Either
them.
that
That is
or
for sure.
it was, yes, right? It
It
had to have
was.
been. I feel like it was there, or either that or The Wrestler, the movie with Mickey Rourke. I think it was his entrance theme when he got in the ring. It's been a while, but anyway, all that being said, this is a terrific album once again, all the way through. Which I've noticed is a recurring theme with all the albums I picked. It's like a lot of these albums are just so good from front to back, like from beginning to end. They're just so good. Like a lot of these, it's all killer no filler. Definitely the case here. Um, what else? I feel like they turned down the heavy notch just a little bit. They turned down the heaviness just a notch from their Restless and Wild album, which came before. Um, but that's not a bad thing. It's still good, still heavy, just a little less heavy, I thought. And the highlights for me are the title track, London Leather Boys. And upon re-listening, I'm actually reminded what a great track "Losing More Than You Ever Had" was. It's I don't know, it's heavy metal. It's got some melody. It's a great song. So yeah, Accept. Balls to the wall. My number 6.
I'll just issue a challenge to Jex. If you really want to find a rare copy of that, that's the one Accept album that I know for sure exists on 8-track. So,
Really?
yeah,
Challenge accepted.
yeah. Or will at the Sussex Flea Market. But anyway, all right. So my number 6 for the first time, I'm matching Bug is Kiss Lick It Up. Great album. Mine is uncolored. Actually, I think it looks a little different because the title is not like it's solid. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have an outline on it. So mine's a Canadian cassette on Mercury, but it was probably issued a few times. And so what the cassette itself looked like. I think that's kind of neat. QC10 because quality has a name. There's a cassette episode there in the future, I'm sure. Not much for credits inside here, but I mean, the song "Lick It Up," the big premiere on MTV, the big unmasking. We've seen it many years after the fact. There's a lot more to this album than that, though. I mean, Exciter's a great opener. There's really heavy stuff on here, like "Young and Wasted," "Not for the Innocent." Like the Gene songs tend to be really heavy. On the Eighth Day. On the Eighth Day should have been one of those Kiss anthems that I could. That sounds like a crowd participation song to me, but it didn't seem to happen. Probably the closest thing to a radio friendly song in here after "Lick It Up" is "A Million to One," which is great. That's a great Paul song, great chorus. I mean, you could always count on Paul to deliver that, or "Tears Are Falling," or songs like that. Um, you know, Vinnie Vincent was, Vinnie Vincent, but when it comes to songwriting, there's good stuff all over this album. And, so there you go. That's my number 6. And Bug's number 5. Now we're in the top 5.
I'll show you my Kiss cassette looks much different than yours. It's the black
Oh, yeah.
with some gold
Yeah.
lettering.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yours is Columbia House, right?
That's why.
Yeah, so it looks more like a CBS cassette for that reason.
Yeah. Rick Derringer, I also found out this morning, plays solo on
Exciter.
Exciter. Yeah. I didn't know that. So my number 5 album is one that Will has already shown. This is Dio, Holy Diver. This is a Canadian press. Collage of photos on the inner sleeve.
Nice.
And Warner Brothers. So I didn't really get into Dio in the 80s. It wasn't till much later. So this is the debut album by the band Dio after obviously Ronnie James Dio left Black Sabbath. He took Vinny Appice with him from Sabbath. He played drums. Jimmy Bain, of course, played in Rainbow with Ronnie James. And I didn't know until not that long ago that Jakey Lee was actually supposed to be the guitar player. when they formed Dio.
I don't think I
Um,
knew that.
yeah, I didn't know that either. And it's funny, instead of joining Dio, he went to Ozzy's
It's
band.
crazy. It's crazy. The what ifs or the could have beens or the
Exactly. So like Will said, I always thought Rainbow in the Dark would be the most well-known Dio song, not only from this album, but probably overall. And he also mentioned Gypsy, which is one of my favorite songs from this album. Um, yeah, so instead of Jakey Lee joining the band, it was Vivian Campbell, who came from Sweet Savage, new wave of British heavy metal, who people like us would probably only know from one song, which would have been Killing Time.
killing time. Yeah,
Course, was on Garage Inc. by
yeah.
Metallica. I think it was a
It's a B side of the Unforgiven, I think.
Given, yeah.
think.
It was one of the Black Album songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, great. It's a quintessential heavy metal album, this one. I mean, it critically for 1983 for metal albums, this would probably be right up there. But for me, it's my number 5 album of 1983.
My number 5 album, an album we probably won't ever hear about again, Y&T, Mean Street. It's my number 5. I've seen it a couple times already. I'll keep it pretty short. This is just a great album. This is not my introduction to Y&T. My introduction to Y&T was 10. But this came shortly after. Mean Streak was one of the first songs. I think it was the first song I heard after I first listened to 10. But it became my favorite Y&T album. Lonely Side of Town, I think, is the best Y&T song. It's just such a good song. Um, but the album is excellent from start to finish. So that is my number 5.
Interesting. Interesting.
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay, Jex. You're
If
number
I'm not,
four.
if I'm not, all right. And if I'm not mistaken, Will, you have a CD copy of Main Street, do you not?
Somewhere. I
You're
don't.
welcome.
I
You're
don't. Do
welcome.
I? Possibly. It's been a
Oh
Oh
while.
yeah, yeah,
man,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. I'm like, who got rid of that?
Yeah, we found it
I
at
also
Spin It.
have
I had it in
the
my hands, and
I also have the terribly
go on.
designed 5 album like it's the first
Oh
5 or
yeah,
6 albums or whatever,
Earthquake.
but like the albums aren't one CD per. It's like 2 songs might be on the end of this album, and then that's not it's poorly designed, but that is how I got them all
Yeah.
originally.
Overlap. Anyway, my number. What are we? Number 5.
Number five.
Welcome
Yeah, I said
back.
number four. I
All
don't
right,
know.
all good. So my number 5 is Bark of the Moon once again, and I got it. I got it for a nice price, as you can see. Uh, Again, I don't know what I could say about this album that hasn't been said. This again was one of my earliest Ozzy albums. I got it at a yard sale on cassette. First time I ever owned it was on cassette. Found it at a yard sale with The Ultimate Sin, and I'm like, man, this is good. This is some good stuff. So it's got that. I know there's no denying that Randy Rhoads was a phenomenal guitar player, but I have a soft spot since this is one of the earliest Ozzy I heard. Jakey Lee, he's a great guitar player as well. So I feel like they both do a great job in Ozzy's band. So yeah, not a bad song on here once again. I mean the opener, the title track, "Bark at the Moon" with those opening notes. You know what you're in for. And I love "So Tired" is actually it's one of those slower songs like Will mentioned. It's just good. The slow, the fast, everything on here is great. "Center of Eternity" probably my favorite. When it starts out with those monks, chanting, and then when it kicks in, it's like whoa. Um, Slow down. Now you see, now you don't. So yeah, not much else to say. Ozzy Osbourne, Bark of the Moon. Oh,
Jex
released
does
on
such a
December 2nd.
Jex does such a good job at sitting perfectly still. Your
Oh
picture
no.
was frozen, is what I'm saying.
Oh no, did you miss a lot of it?
Yeah, that's all right. We've seen the album. I don't know
Oh,
why, but
we could
Okay.
hear you anyway. That's what
far,
matters.
yeah, far be it for me to say, hey, there's something wrong with your picture, because it happens to me all the time. So yeah, so now we are into the top five, and I had a really hard time finding an order for these. I really did. Um, a lot of these could be interchanged. So this is, as of filming, this is the order that I decided on. My number 5 is probably will always be my favorite album from this band is Journey Frontiers. released, I believe, February of 1983. Another multi-platinum album, not quite as many copies sold as Escape, even though I personally think it's slightly better album. This is what the old CBS cassette looks like, just prior to the switch to the old chromium dioxide. The biggest hit off of this was, of course, the Separate Ways, Worlds Apart. One of my favorite Journey songs, and a song I do not get tired of, unlike a lot of their radio staples. I do not get tired of Separate Ways. I've always got time for it. I love the fact that Stranger Things brought it back a little bit with that little remix. Probably the second best known song on here was Faithfully, a ballad, and then it had a couple minor hits with After the Fall and Send Her My Love. I like this album. It's got a couple of the heaviest Journey songs, believe it or not. Side 2 opener, Edge of the Blade. I recommend anybody listen to it that would dismiss Journey as a pop band. It's a really, really good song. I also like Back Talk for the same reason. And there was a video for it. I don't think it was a single, but I think Chain Reaction is another pretty good rocking tune on this album. But it's the classic lineup. It's the last album with the classic lineup until Trial by Fire 13 years later. Pretty common album to find and definitely worth checking out. My number 5 is Frontiers.
Have you heard the remake of Separate Ways by Chris Daughtry and Lizzie Hale?
I have not.
Check it out. It's really good. Really good. So my number 4 album is, Will's already talked about this one. This is Flick of the Switch by AC/DC. Kind of the mirror opposite of the Back in Black album, all white, and it's got the embossed Angus pulling on the switch. So it's on Atlantic, Canadian Columbia House pressing. So for me, Flick of the Switch is like the Power Rage of the Bon Scott era. There's no songs you're going to hear on the radio, but it's a solid album from front to back. If you like AC/DC, you're going to get the AC/DC sound. Solid, but unspectacular, I would say. They wanted a raw sound on this one after getting kind of the Mutt Lange polish over the previous 3 albums. So the band produced this album themselves. I would have liked to heard Flick of the Switch as the opener instead of, is it Rising Power? Yeah,
Rising Power is good, but it's slow, right?
So Flick of the Switch, I think, would have been a better opener. Landslide is a great track. Guns for Hire, Nervous Shakedown. Really, really like this album, and it's my number 4 for 1983.
Also, it was the last one that Phil Rudd was on until Ballbreaker.
That's right.
Even though Simon writes in the videos, Phil Rudd still played on the album.
He did.
Yeah.
My number 4. Stuff was so hard to rank these. I just having flashbacks to just figuring out where I want to put stuff. Released June 10th. I have Stevie Nicks' Wild Heart as my number 4 album for 83. So this would have been the year after Mirage. I think she went into the studio pretty much right after that tour wrapped up. It peaked at number 5 on the US Top 200 on Billboard, and it was there for 7 weeks. It stayed on the charts for the whole year, basically. I mean, Stand Back was on here, which was a big song. It peaked at number 5. If Anyone Falls peaked at number 14, and then Nightbird was at 33, which I believe I read was her favorite song off the album. She like performed it on Saturday Night Live or something as well. If you haven't heard it, anybody out there, Enchanted is an unbelievable song, probably my favorite off the album. Quite a bit different from some of the other albums we've talked about, for sure, from this year. Of course, Tom Petty returned for this album. He was on I Will Run to You, but I just love this album. Been on a very big Stevie Nicks kick for about 2 years, so it definitely climbed the ranks more recently than some of these others. So she has the number 4 spot for me.
Cool. All right, Jex.
All right. Can you see me okay? Is there motion? Is there movement?
Yeah. Well, now that you say it, it's
I hope you can see me. I turned on my data, turned off the Wi-Fi here. It's the worst. But you know what's not the worst? My number 4, which is Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind. What can I say about Peace of Mind that hasn't already been said? I will say that for some reason I don't own it. I don't have it on any format, which is weird. I need to get on that. I'm picky. I'm picky when it comes to my Iron Maiden. I want either early pressings on vinyl or on CD. I want the '98 remaster specifically. So I haven't found either. I haven't found either or, but all in good time. Seriously, again, this is all killer, no filler. Where Eagles Dare, Flight of Icarus, Die with Your Boots On, The Trooper, and my personal favorite, The Closer to Tame a Land. Uh, Once again, the theme continues. It's a great album from front to back.
And
And
To Tame a Land is based on what, Jex?
oh, pop quiz, huh? Uh, I feel like I know it, but I'm not. I can't think of it.
Pretty cool. If you have to look it up sometime. No, it's based on Dune.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and when you know that, then you look at the lyrics, makes a lot more sense.
Okay, cool. I'll keep that in
Yeah.
mind.
Before there was the Dune movie, it was based
Yeah,
on the novel,
the novel. Yeah,
but not long before there was a movie. Oddly enough, about a year.
true. Yeah, it was '84. Yeah, that's right.
And Dream Theater. I know this because Dream Theater do a version of To Tame a Land.
Never heard it. I'll have to check that out. I'm curious now.
All right. Okay. So my number four, they're aside from Coney Hatch and Helix and Anvil, haven't had much for Canadian. So I'm going to add one more to that. Second album by this artist, an artist I'm a huge fan of. He's made some new music in recent years, which I'm glad he's back. Hopefully he tours around somewhere where we can see him. Aldo Nova with his second album, Subject Aldo Nova. Another old Canadian cassette. This is on Portrait, just like Cyndi Lauper and Accept, and like groups. The old CBS tape. If you're more interested in these tapes, look back for the Tim's Vinyl Confessions episode. This album didn't do as well as the debut. His debut was a double platinum seller, but I think this one is every bit as good, if not better. It's just great melodic rock, although it is some of the stuff on it, if you can get past the electronic, it's more like human playing electronic drums is what it is. But it is very of its time production wise. But the songs, man, the songs are so good. Monkey on Your Back, one of the first anti-drug songs ever. That was a single in a video. Curiously, it had only come out the year before. He covers Hey Operator by Coney Hatch, which actually was the first time that I ever heard the song was Aldo Nova's version. I like Coney Hatch's version better, but good. It's really good. Of course, there's some melodic stuff on here. Ballad, Victim of Broken Heart should have been a big hit. All Night Long, Always Be Mine should have been a big hit. That was a single. It's just another great album from Aldo Nova. It was supposed to be more of a quasi concept album. So some of the songs like War Suite and Paradise and Armageddon are kind of following that theme, but the label kind of freaked out and said, no, we need some commercial tunes too. So it's kind of a hybrid, but it's all good. My number four, Subject Aldo Nova.
So my number three album, I went back and forth with this and my number two album. This one landed at number three, but it is a monster. Def Leppard, Pyromania. I've got a Canadian press on Vertigo. It's a Columbia House pressing.
I like that label.
I do too, but I never understood just the plain red inner.
Every copy I've ever seen is like that. I don't know why.
I don't either. It seems like a bit of waste, but first LP with Phil Collin on guitar. Diamond status, what can we say? Mutt Lange produced this one. So back in 1983, I think it was maybe at Christmas in 83, we got a VCR in my house. And I started recording Friday night videos, which started airing on NBC in the summer of 1983. And Photograph and Rock of Ages were all over that. Almost every week, I think they were playing those videos. But it wasn't until Christmas of 84 that I actually bought the cassette. I remember buying it in Florida when I was on vacation visiting my grandfather down there during Christmas. I remember it was a cream colored cassette. I don't have it anymore. Tim, I gave you a bunch of cassettes a while ago. I'm wondering if it might have been in that.
I don't think so. Would it have
No.
looked like this?
Yes,
Like
exactly.
that sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, besides the
I
two.
did get the high and dry, the original high and dry from you that day.
Okay, yeah,
Not,
okay.
not Pyromania.
Yeah. So that's my number three album. I mean, besides Photograph and Rock of Ages, Too Late for Love, Foolin', Action Not Words, on and on. It's such a great album. My number three.
The red inner sleeve. I think the reason why it's plain like that, they want to represent fire, is my guess. They wanted to represent like flames. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Normally they're so spot on with graphics. That seems, of course, that's early days. So who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a waste.
Mine didn't even come with an inner sleeve, so at least yours got
Yeah,
one.
but what a price you got it for?
That's true.
What'd you
That's
pay for
true.
it, $1?
$1.
Yeah. All right. Well,
My number three, I wish it was higher. I also have Pyromania. So, most things been covered. I mean, again, I think I've said this on any episode we talked about Def Leppard. One of the earliest albums I remember hearing. Um, heard this a ton when I was younger. I still think Rock Rock Till You Drop should be an opener. Currently, like I've seen them 4 times, they never play it. I think it'd be such a cool song to open with or play somewhere. I've always loved Stage Fright. I think that song is excellent. Coming Under Fire, love that song as well. But I mean, it's Pyromania. There's not. We've talked about this album so much for a good reason, and that is my number three.
all right, Jax.
All right. My number three has been mentioned a couple of times, but it needs another mention. Debut from Metallica, Kill 'Em All. This is great. I love this sound. This is probably their thrashiest, and I love that. My personal favorite Metallica album is the follow-up, Ride the Lightning, but this is a close second. I love this one. It's the one that started it all, of course. They had something to prove, and I think they proved it. It's heavily inspired by the new wave of British heavy metal, which they were huge fans of, and that show was on here. What else? They brought an aggression and speed that was still new in '83. Like this was not common. Now it's like, oh, old news, right? But in '83, this is like, whoa, what's going on? The big thrash movement hadn't really hit yet. You didn't have the big four or anything like that. But this was the beginning of that. And what else? Once again, there's no bad song on here. There's like Hit the Light, The Four Horsemen, Motor Breath probably my favorite one. Whiplash, Metal Militia, Anesthesia, the bass solo, everything on here just is killer. So I thought it would be higher, but number three is the highest I could get it.
Well, again, yeah, I think we all agree it was a fantastic year in music, and a lot of bands were just really hitting their stride. Will's already talked about this. Number three for me is the second album from Night Ranger, Midnight Madness. I've got the Curious Epic CBS Canadian version of it, and yeah, as opposed to the MCA version. So always been a big fan of this band, and as Will said, finally got a chance to see them last summer. They didn't play a full set, but we still saw them. We met them, and you go to see Night Ranger now, you'll hear a lot of songs from Midnight Madness. It was their biggest selling album. You Can Still Rock in America was not a top 40 hit, but a lot of people do know that song. It's a great anthemic opener. Rumors in the Air is a really, really cool song. Touch of Madness. They would open a lot of shows with Touch of Madness. Yeah, When You Close Your Eyes was a great, it was a top 20 single. Passion Play. Nobody talks about that song. That's a great song. It's just a great album all the way through. It's really fun if you get this on vinyl. So the front and back cover, there's a lot of it's sort of like Somewhere in Time, like the Iron Maiden. There's a lot of hidden stuff. A lot of hidden stuff in the front and back covers of these if you get it on vinyl. So yeah, I didn't know where I had a hard time slotting it somewhere, but that's my number three.
All right, down to the top two. This is an album that I absolutely fell in love with when it came out in 1983. Went as Vince Neil for Halloween in 1984. We're talking about Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. This is the original cassette I would have gotten back in at 83 or 84 when I got it. And then I saw the vinyl. A friend of my brother had the vinyl. I didn't realize it had a different cover, but I love the pictures on the inside of this. To me, Motley Crue, I mentioned Friday Night Videos. Looks at Kill was all over that as well. My neighbor had an older brother, and we'd go over and look at his Hit Parader magazines and see Motley Crue. They were like superheroes to me. Um, just fell in love with the band back then. And Tim, I know you've mentioned New Jersey being that album that you anticipated for a band that you love for Bon Jovi. For me, it was Theater of Pain. To
Right.
the
After,
anticipation
yeah.
of this, yeah, because I had gotten into Motley Crue. It's only 35 minutes, and I've never understood why they didn't put a couple of the other tracks they recorded. Black Widow, I Will Survive are good tracks, and I'm not sure why they didn't make it on the album. That would be my only kind of criticism of it. Is it's short. It's got God Save the Children of the Beast and In the Beginning. So it kind of cuts down on the time, but I just love Shout at the Devil. I know my mother wasn't real thrilled with me listening to an album called Shout at the Devil when I was 10 years old, but hey, all for the love of rock and roll.
Nice. All right.
Oh, number two. This is kind of where I expected this album to be for myself when I started this, but clearly it's a little bit overlooked, I guess. I have Dokken, Breaking the Chains, as my number two album. Um, I absolutely love this album. I don't know why. It's my favorite Dokken album. Um, and Don does this singing thing where it sounds like he's holding back the entire time, and I love it for some reason. I mean, the guitar is amazing. There's clearly some subject matter here with songs like Felony and Young Girls, but I mean, a lot of bands had that at this time, so we'll kind of disregard it. I still think they're good songs, but just don't look too hard into them. Um, but yeah, this album is just great. I mean, opens up with Breaking the Chains, which is an excellent song. Live to Rock, Rock to Live. Paris is Burning is a live version to end it. I believe it was recorded on one of the earlier releases. It's just called Paris. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Um, but everything on here is good. Knight Rider, Seven Thunders. I just absolutely love this album from start to finish, more so than the other albums I've named so far. So that is my number two
Wow.
for 1983.
Someday I'm going to track down some, I don't know how, but I'm going to get an original copy of that first Don Dokken Breaking the Chains with that awful album cover. But yeah, it's the songs are completely different versions. For example, Live to Rock, Rock to Live is called We're Illegal. Different lyrics, same music. They're different recordings. It's not just a matter of remixing. It's
Right.
different recordings. And I can't find it anymore, but there used to be a clip on YouTube of Dokken as a three-piece, with Don being the only guitar player doing Paris, which is Paris is Burning. So yeah, good album. You know, just didn't make my list, but a good album.
Excellent,
All right, Jex,
excellent album.
number two.
All right. Familiar territory. It's been covered already. Released September 18th, 1983. The Mighty Kiss with Lick It Up. This is my number two. It had to be on top of the list. The makeup comes off, and they treat us with this gold. It is funny what time can do, right? Because for a while, I preferred the makeup era of Kiss. I didn't care for, I don't know what you call this, hair metal glam era. I preferred the makeup stuff, but now I find myself preferring this era. The 80s Kiss. I still like the makeup stuff. Yeah, that's classic. There's no denying it. But I always find myself more gravitating towards, Lick It Up or Asylum or Animalize. The 80s were a great time for Kiss. This is no exception. What else did I have here? I used to consider like this album when I first heard it. I used to consider it okay. I liked it. Now I love it. Like obviously it's my number two, but I can't get enough of it. It's gotten so much better over time. Like every time I listen to it, oh, it's so good. Like I think it was Tim who mentioned Young and Wasted. It's such a great time with that galloping like it's just it's great. On the eighth day, I agree with Tim. It should have been like one of those anthems It's such a rock anthem. But that wasn't in the cards. That fits like a glove. A Million to One. I love it. Slower one. The opener, Exciter. Once again, I'm just repeating what everyone else has said, but it's a terrific album. So had to be close to the top of my list.
Yeah, the fact that that was at number six for me, it's almost like there were six number ones. It was so hard to
Yeah.
slot them in. Yeah. Okay, so people are keeping track. They probably know what my number two, my two and one are because I haven't mentioned them yet myself, and it was really hard. I went back and forth between these two more than anything else. But anyway, my number two, and I got to say, I'm really thrilled that all three of you have put it somewhere. Mean Streak. First of all, look at that. Is that not the coolest? I mean, I love the drawing. I love the colors. I love the logo. It's just so cool. This is Canadian, of course, A&M. The U.S. cassettes look way different. And it's an old one too because you can also find this one. That's a black cassette, but I think the white ones are older. Yeah, this was even though I got into the band in 1990 when 10 came out, this was the first Y&T album I actually bought because I happened to find it and I knew their albums were rare. So I thought I better get this or I'm going to regret it. Yeah, Mean Streak is a classic, all-time classic. It was their first ever video, but that's another story. They should have had videos before then. Don't get me started. Straight Through the Heart is one of my favorite songs of theirs, and it's the second track. I think it's just a really heavy. It's got cool stops and starts in it, but Dave Meniketti's solo in that song. He does this trick with his Les Paul, where he between the pickups and the toggle switch, it cancels out, so it sounds like a helicopter. And the first time I heard him do it, because he's done it in a few different solos, was in this song, and it goes from one side, left to right side, or right to left. I had headphones on, and I kept rewinding it and listening to that one part. And if you go on YouTube and look for Straight Through the Heart, the most played part is that solo because people just want to hear what the heck he's doing. I agree with Will. Lonely Side of Town is a fantastic song. It's got Midnight in Tokyo, which was dedicated to their fan base in Japan, where they'd already taken hold and were well loved. Hang 'em High is a heavy song that would open concerts for them. It's a great album. I mean, no pun intended. They have a lot of tens for me, and this is one of them. So yeah, it was gonna. There's no way it wasn't gonna chart really high for me. That's my number two, and now we're down to the best of the best, as said by us, the number one albums we have chosen from 1983. Bug, finish strong here.
Well, I think I'm going to finish strong with an album that I think everybody has mentioned so far, and I'm going to show all three formats that I have. I'm not going to say much about the album itself because nothing really needs to be said. It is Kill 'Em All. So this is an early 90s American copy that I picked up when I was in high school. It's got the clear cassette. I think I got that in Holton, Maine. First got into Metallica and Justice for All. Was at the mall, was looking for a cassette to buy, had money in my pocket, didn't know what to get, so I looked. They had a display. The Justice for All had just come out, and that was my introduction to Metallica. And then I started going back and getting all their albums. So this one would have been the CD I would have gotten from, I believe, Columbia House, also probably in the early 90s. And my vinyl copy is actually a French pressing without Am I Evil and Blitzkrieg. It is on Music for Nations.
Nice.
Mine's a UK on Music for Nations, very similar.
Yeah. And it comes with the t-shirt order form for £4. Get a Metallica t-shirt. And the inner sleeve is pretty good too.
Yeah.
Really thick inner sleeve, lyrics and band photos. Number one.
I think it's important to remember just how young these guys were.
Yeah.
Like they were all 19, 20, 21.
Oh, yeah.
And playing at such a high level.
They look young.
Lars and his crappy little mustache. Yeah. All right. Well, I think I know.
My number one album of the year. This is the only little bit of something to show anyway. It's Lick It Up. I mean, I debated back and forth my top three so much, but I feel like Lick It Up just has to be number one. My favorite part about doing these is we've all mentioned this, but I don't like this. We all have it high, but the reasons are all different, like different songs. Like for me, Fits Like a Glove is very could be my favorite song off of this album. It's just so good. Give Me More is a great song. Lick It Up's obviously a classic. But yeah, the Gene songs on here are like stay on the heavy side, and his voice, like he uses his voice to keep them heavier. I mean, obviously Vinnie Vincent, his first official Kiss debut, even though it wasn't really, but his songwriting makes this album takes it to another level. Um, I read somewhere that this was in like Guitar World's top 10 guitar albums ever, which is kind of cool. Um, but yeah, it's just a classic album. You get Eric Carr's heavy drums carrying over from the Creatures start. Um, just an excellent album. That's my number one. Number one album of 1983. Don't listen to what these other guys say.
You know,
I think it's fun that we've for the most part we've got a lot of these albums, a lot of the same albums, but in different spots.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right,
You
Jex.
know, as soon as the show started, I saw Will's shirt. I'm like, I'll bet you anything that's foreshadowing. That is
Yeah.
foreshadowing right there. I knew it. I knew it.
You know,
That's,
Jex, I
Had
bet
to.
a lot of the reason that you like to listen to the '80s Kiss stuff now is because those songs don't get overplayed for the most part.
that's true.
Yeah,
That is a good point. You always hear the same stuff on the radio. Rock and
yeah.
roll all night. You'll hear Beck, Love
It's
Gun,
made
but
for loving you. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, my number one has been mentioned a couple of times, but gotta say it again. This is Dio, Holy Diver. This is the one I knew when I started putting this list together. I knew this is my number one. Absolutely killer album. I love it. I was actually late to the Dio party. I think I discovered him. I think it was 2010. I think it was right before he passed away. It was like spring of 2010. So I think it's either right before or right after. I think it was right before. But anyway, I got to give credit to my buddies, the Judd brothers from back home, Travis and Levi. They got me into Dio. I was at HMV with them, and Levi was getting Holy Diver. He's like, they got Holy Diver. It was like I think it was like $5.99 or $6.99. It was cheap. So he's like, you get one too, and I'm like, all right, sure. I didn't really know Dio. I mean, I knew Dio, like Will said, I knew the Tenacious D, the Pick of Destiny. I knew who Dio was. I knew who Ronnie James Dio was, but I never really listened to the band Dio. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. For that price, I couldn't let it go. And that was in Moncton. We lived in Bathurst at the time, so the whole drive from Moncton to Bathurst, 2.5 hours. We must have listened to Holy Diver like 3 or 4 times, like back to back. We just had it on a loop, and it was incredible. I'm like, man, this album is so good. Like, it's everything about it, like that. The opening track, "Stand Up and Shout." I'm just like, oh man! As soon as that started, like first listen, I'm like, this is gonna be awesome. This album is gonna rock. Like this song is incredible. And I had heard Holy Diver before. That the title track I think was the only thing I knew, and I love it. And then everything else that came after, I'm like, oh man, this was like the best 6 or 7 whatever I paid for it. That was the best money I spent. Like I couldn't believe it. Like everything is gold. The guitars, Vivian Campbell, the drums, Vinny Appice, Appice. I don't know how to say.
I think it's a piece, and I think Carmine goes by Appice,
Oh,
or
that's what.
maybe I've
Yeah,
got it mixed up. I don't know.
I know they go by different
Yeah,
pronunciations, but anyway, Vivian Campbell on guitars, of course, Ronnie James Dio's voice. I still remember, like, I always think of that drive when we listen to it. I remember that whisper at the beginning of, what is it? Don't talk to strangers. And because Travis was doing it with "Don't talk to strangers." I'm like, oh man, hearing it on the stereo and hearing his voice was like shivers, man. It was
imagine
so
calling
cool.
somebody up on the phone and playing that for them, then hanging up. Jeez.
Yeah, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah,
Everyone's got caller ID now.
yeah.
But yeah, what else? Because you think it's going to be a slower tempo song, the "Don't Talk to Strangers," and then when it picks up, you're like, oh man, this is incredible. Um, Speaking of incredible, there's incredible riffs on here, like songs like "Stand Up and Shout," "Straight Through the Heart," and the unexpected keyboards on "Rainbow in the Dark." I remember hearing those keyboards, like I'm not going to do them. I won't do them justice. But I remember just thinking, man, this came out of nowhere, and I love it. So once again,
If
no
I'm not
highlights.
mistaken, apparently that's Dio doing it.
Yeah, Correct. Yeah, that's Dio. I didn't know that till lately. So yeah, it's cool. So again, no highlights. The whole album is absolute gold, hence number one. So that's it. Over to you, Tim.
All right. Well, my number one, I mean, it had to be Pyromania. What else? Uh, this is a US copy. The original copy I had of this was Canadian, and I liked it the way it looked better because as opposed to this on the side, it had like the actual logo and the title were written along here. But whatever. This is a copy I have now. But I mean, I've called Hysteria my favorite album of all time, but this is what led up to it. You know, there's probably no one song in Hysteria that I like as well as Photograph. That's another song that it just does not matter how many times I hear it. I will not get tired of it. But the whole album is great. Too Late for Love is such an overlooked. I hesitate to call it a ballad because it's pretty heavy. Die Hard the Hunter. I mean, that's fantastic. Billy's Got a Gun. Um, it's just, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's an amazing album, totally deserving of its status. And yeah, there was very little question. Y&T was knocking on the door, but I had to go with what I've been listening to the longest, which is Def Leppard. So I like the fact that we all had different number ones, but I mean, it just goes to show the high quality there was this year. I do want to mention something. You guys got me thinking with all of these different albums. A little bit off topic, but not really. There is a compilation album that K-Tel put out in 1983 called Masters of Metal. Now, yes. Masters of Metal, that's metal as it existed in 1983. But a lot of the songs, or a lot of the albums we've mentioned, there are songs on that Masters of Metal. It's got Trashed by Black Sabbath. It's got Mean Streak, Y&T. It's got Breaking the Chains, Dokken. It's got Lick It Up. It's got Looks That Kill. It's got The Trooper. It's got You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. I think it's got Don't Get Mad, Get Even by Helix, or at least the Canadian version does. So it was a solid year. Oh, it's got Rainbow in the Dark. I knew there was another one. So yeah, solid year. 1983, solid year for hard rock and metal. It was the first year that it was really starting to gain in popularity. I think we can all thank Quiet Riot for that. The US Festival, videos were really taking off. Canada was a year away from much music. We had to rely on like Andy said, Friday night videos or Good Rockin' Tonight or video hits. But yeah, it just a fertile time. And I mean, we could have all done another 15, I'm sure, if we dug down through our collection. So, but there you go. That's our picks for 1983. What are your picks if you want to make your own lists? A lot of times people will make their own lists, and I read every one of them, which is fantastic. I want to thank everybody at this time of year. I want to thank everybody for their support throughout and continuing to watch Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I want to thank my co-hosts because with just me talking, week in, week out, it would get kind of boring. So I like the fact I can mix it up and have these differing opinions on here, and sometimes very differing opinions. But there you go. Hope everybody has a great Christmas. Happy New Year. We're not going to be, normally we have a Monday episode. There will be no Monday episode because it is Christmas Day, but we will be back a week's time to do the best of 2023 because 2023 was actually a good year too. But there you go. Our top 10s for 1983. On behalf of Bug, Will, Jex, and myself, thank you all so much for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions.